What is up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be ranking all of the weapons from Season 3. I'm sure this will generate a lot of discussion. I'm going to be going through and ranking them, kind of talking about what I like and dislike about the weapon and why I place it where I do. If you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful, informative, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you would like to see more, and comment down below if you would like to see me do something like this, but with the POIs that we have in Season 3. And the time I'm making this video is shortly after the combat AR's release. So if you're watching this later down the line and you're wondering why some items may or may not be in here, that's why. I also chose to leave out the cow catcher, the porta-fort, the frag grenades, and the fireflies, just because I felt like those weapons didn't really deserve a ranking. You kind of get what you get out of them, and everyone kind of knows what they do. So since the combat AR is the newest weapon, we're going to start with this, and I'm going to say this is A tier. I don't think it's quite S, because I don't think it's as good as the AUG, which will be an S tier, spoiler. But it's really, really, really good. The recoil is somewhat controllable, and if you tap fire it, like I can tap fire this thing. If you tap fire it as fast as you can, it shoots almost as fast as full auto, but it has like no recoil for whatever reason. So I think the combat AR is really good. It's really solid. Very, very good DPS. It's somewhat of a high skill weapon because it does have a decent amount of recoil, but it has less bloom than something like the hammer AR or the ranger, and I feel like that's what puts it in A tier. And since I already mentioned it, let's just go ahead and put the AUG in S. Even with the nerfs, I think the AUG is still far and away the best assault rifle. Just being the only first-person AR, I know we have the DMR, but being the only first-person like hit scan AR this season, I think the AUG is just always going to be the best AR unless they nerf it into the ground. But the way you can peek off a first-person weapon and play around cover is just like much more consistent than I feel like the third-person guns, and it's way easier to go for headshots consistently and get like 40+ damage out of the AUG. So yeah, the AUG is still my favorite AR in Season 3 despite the nerfs, but the combat AR is really good as well, and the combat AR is actually like a lot of fun to use, I think. For D tier, Charge SMG. Do I need to say more? I feel like everyone kind of knows this weapon isn't very good. It is situationally good, and I feel like that's something a lot of people get confused, as there are like some situations or some fights where the Charge SMG is perfect, but you kind of need everything to play out perfectly for it to work well. Like, you need to be fighting someone who just lets you charge it and then like pushes into you when you have it full charged. I just don't think it's very good. It's probably best when used with an auto shotty though. You kind of open up with the Charge SMG and then swap to the auto to finish them, but I just don't think it's good. I think it requires you to play around it too much, and typically the weapons in Fortnite that are good are going to be the weapons that are good in like a variety of situations, because we only have 5 slots, and even then you're not going to dedicate all 5 slots to weapons. So yeah, I just don't think this weapon is good. What I would have liked to have seen is if it was like kind of a mediocre SMG if you just used it normally, and then you had the option to charge it to make it better, but it just relies way too much on the charge mechanic to even be usable. And on the flip side, we have the Stinger SMG, which I feel like is between A and S tier. If the combat SMG was in the game, the combat would go in S and then the Stinger would go in A. But yeah, it's somewhat like an A+ or an S-. I feel like it's incredibly good, very minimal bloom, really high fire rate, not as much damage as something like the combat, but it has basically no recoil, and it actually does have a tighter hipfire spread than what the combat has. So if you're in a close range fight and you're hip firing this weapon and your aim is decent, you are going to hit every shot with the Stinger SMG. It's way too good. And I feel like that's kind of what makes the Charge SMG also feel bad, because there's not really much of a need to play around this when we have the Stinger SMG, which is already insanely good. It's really good in both build and zero build. It fries walls really well. Really can consistently get shots through builds if you have an opponent weak or want to prevent them from healing. It's just incredibly good. I feel like all of the SMGs in Chapter 3, aside from the Charge SMG, have just been way too good. Next weapon, we will talk about the Striker Pump. I'm going to have it in S tier. It's still my favorite shotgun despite the nerfs to it this week. The body damage nerf I don't think is that noticeable. I still get like really good damage out of it when I have good aim. You know, if I have decent aim on target and I end up hitting them in the head, I pretty much always get decent damage out of the Striker Pump. I know people say it's inconsistent or whatever, but I think it's a good weapon. I think a lot of people's first impressions of it were just really bad at the start of Chapter 3. And even after the nerfs, I feel like if you have good aim and you're able to hit headshots, it's still a really good shotgun. Although the other 2 shotguns are also really good. With the buffs this week, I think the 2-shot shotgun is actually an A tier. I could see it being like B+, A-, or A range. Like somewhere in there is where the 2-shot shotgun is. In zero build, it's really good, and it might be better than the pump shotgun in zero build, just because it's a little easier to use, I feel like, than the pump is. You can go for body shots and still just get really consistent damage in situations where you might not have as much time to line up the headshot or fighting against someone who's awkward to hit, whatever. The 2-shot performs well with both headshots and body shots, which makes it really nice in zero build. I think one of the main problems a lot of people have with the 2-shot in zero build is they treat it like the auto shotgun. They think they're just going to stick on the 2-shot for the entire fight, and that's really not how it goes. You want to use it more like the pump, where you shoot it, swap to your SMG, and then swap back to the 2-shot once it's ready to shoot. And in build mode, the fire rate buff made it a little more reliable to make edit plays with, and that's like super important. So I would put that A tier. And I also think I want to put the auto shotgun A tier. I talked about this in one of my recent videos, but I think all of the shotguns are really good right now. The auto shotgun, I think, is another weapon that gets hate because of how it was at the start of Chapter 3. Like Chapter 3 Season 1, both these shotguns were pretty bad. But they've both gotten nerfed, or buffed a few times, rather. And I think they're both pretty reliable and good. And to be honest, like I've said many times over the course of this week, I think all 3 of these shotguns are actually really good. So I feel like some of you might rank one higher than the other, but I think that they're all very usable and very good. The next weapon, what should we go to next? Maybe the Shockwaves, since I've just talked about them so many times. If you've watched my videos before, you know I think Shockwaves are really good in zero build. It's good for defensive play, like if you get caught in a bad spot, if you tag somebody and want to push them, if you want to get somebody off high ground, if you want to get somebody out of a porta-fort. There's just so many different things. If you want to get somebody out of a bush, there's so many different things you can do with the Shockwaves, and that's what makes it the ideal mobility item in my opinion. And it's also really good in build mode because you can use it to get into metal boxes. You can use it to take height. It's actually pretty broken in build mode. And it kind of ruins the game to an extent. But yeah, the Shockwaves are really good. I think the Grappler would be A tier though. I think the Grappler is really good, and in squad zero build, I actually kind of prefer the Grappler more. I've been playing zero build arena a decent amount, and when I've been playing with other streamers who are really good players, and we all just kind of get grapple gloves and then grapple around the map looking for fights. So if you're playing squads and you want just like a pure mobility item, I feel like Grapplers could be better than the Shockwaves. But it just kind of depends what your goal is. If all you care about is winning, the Shockwaves are probably better. But if you want to play aggressive and push as many fights as possible and try to get into the action as fast as possible and just rotate from fight to fight very quickly, the Grappler is really good as well. And even in situations where maybe I can't find Shockwaves but I'm able to find the grapple glove, I'm not too concerned about it. Like, either option is fine. I just prefer Shockwaves for a few different reasons. I don't know where to put the Rift to go. I guess B or C. Maybe C. It's okay. You can use it. It's really good if you want to like run away from people or reposition an entire team. But it's just not something I really find myself using because odds are I'm going to be able to get one of these options, especially because the grapple glove has set spawn locations. And the Rift to Go is just, it's not really something I like carrying. It's more of like a get out of jail free card. I feel like for a lot of people, they kind of carry it for when they're losing a fight and then they use it. Could be good in tournaments for like positioning and like if you're actively trying to get the best spot possible, but for how I play in public matches, it's just not really something I enjoy using. In the past, you could use a Rift to Go and then pick something else up to replace it as you were using it. And if that was still the case, I would maybe put it in A or B tier, because at that point you could loot your POI, and then if you had a Rift to Go, just use it without actually carrying it and then go somewhere else and find more people. But with how it is right now and the fact that you can't do that, I think I'm going to put it in C. It's not really something I ever find myself carrying. The Heavy Sniper, probably B tier. It's good. I just don't really end up using it because I would rather have mobility, and it's kind of competing for that slot for me. Like, typically I carry assault rifle, shotgun, SMG, heals, and then my last slot is either for mobility or something like the sniper. And while the Heavy Sniper is very good, and it's definitely very useful for like getting into boxes in build mode, and in zero build, just being able to tag someone and do a lot of damage or remove somebody's cover in one shot is really beneficial. I almost always would rather have mobility than the Heavy Sniper. So that's why I'd put it at B tier, maybe C tier. It's just not really something I find myself using. Hammer AR, I think we put at B tier. It's a good weapon. It's definitely very, very solid. And in zero build, you can even use it as an SMG replacement, which is really viable, and it's a pretty fun playstyle. But I don't think it's quite as good as the combat AR for being an AR. So we'll put it at B tier. I think it's good, but yeah, the combat AR is just kind of better, I feel like. The Ranger AR, I feel like we'll put it C tier, kind of just to complete the ranking of ARs. It's good, but it's just something I never really find myself ever using because I would rather use the Hammer AR, I would rather use the combat AR, and I would also rather use the AUG. So while the Ranger AR is really good, and I think it might be one of the most underrated weapons in the game, just not really something I see myself using. For all of Chapter 3, when it's been in the game, there's been better options, but I think this weapon is pretty underrated. It's just, a lot of people put it in like D or F tier and rate it as one of the worst weapons in the game, and I feel like it's just okay. So it should go in C tier. Revolver, I don't know where to put this gun. I think I'm going to put it in C tier. It can be a decent pump, complement weapon. Like you use pump revolver and you just swap back and forth. Like you shoot your pump, swap to the revolver, shoot the revolver, swap back to the pump, shoot the pump, swap, and you just go back and forth. And that is like a really fun playstyle, but it pretty much requires you to be perfect. And when we have weapons in the game like the Stinger SMG or even the Hammer ARs and SMG, it's just like, if you're perfect with pump revolver, it's good, but it's hard to beat those weapons. And with like something like the Stinger SMG, you don't have to be perfect all the time, and you're still just going to get a lot of consistent value. But if we had worse SMGs in the game, like if the Stinger SMG wasn't quite as good, or if instead of the Stinger we had the normal SMG, I could see pump revolver or two-shot revolver being like a really good combo, and it's really fun to use. One of my favorite metas was the pump deagle meta in Season 7, and the revolver and the deagle are like very similar to each other. Next weapon we're going to have is going to be the flare gun, and I think I want to put this in B tier. I made a video earlier this week about how good this weapon is at marking people, and the current flare gun we have in the game, the firework weapon, doesn't actually mark people when they're pinged. So if you shoot it into the sky and there's people nearby, they will get marked, and you'll have a little red diamond above their head telling you exactly where they are, even if they were in a bush or a house when it went off. But they won't get an indication that they're pinged, which I think is pretty overpowered, because that person has pretty much no idea that you know exactly where they are, and you know exactly where they are. And in zero build, that is a pretty big advantage. And then also you have the added benefit of being able to light things on fire with it. But I think using it for like reconnaissance is really, really effective, especially if you want to get high kill games in squads. Just being able to mark an entire squad and wipe them really fast, really beneficial. These final two weapons, I don't really know how to rank. I think the DMR, I would put it in C+ or B-, I think. I don't think it's very good. I think this weapon gets overrated a lot by people who like just see the upside of it, because there's certain guns where like the upside is very good, but kind of like the median level of the weapon. Like if you just have an average fight, like your aim is kind of average in that fight, I don't think you're going to get much out of the DMR. If your aim is very good in the fight, then you can get a lot out of the DMR. But it's just like, it's kind of like the revolver, where it requires you to be perfect to beat something like the AUG in long range fights. Whereas the AUG player can just have a 5 out of 10 match, and they still have pretty decent odds to beat you, even if you're really good with the DMR. So I don't think it's very good. I very rarely find myself ever losing to it. And I see a lot of people gassing it in my comments or in the comments of my stream. But it's just not a weapon I enjoy using, and I understand how to like kind of deal with weapons with bullet velocity, because I've played games like Battlefield or Warzone in the past where every weapon is projectile. And even in those games, I liked DMRs. Like the DMR in Warzone was really overpowered. The SKS in Battlefield 4 was one of my favorite guns. But yeah, I just don't think this gun is very good. And then finally with the Sidearm Pistol, I think we'll put it in B tier. It's a good gun. I think it's slightly above average. If the SMG wasn't so overpowered, I think you would see Shotgun and Sidearm Pistol being a really viable loadout. But the fact that the SMGs are so overpowered in Chapter 3 has kind of kept the Sidearm Pistol down for pretty much all of Chapter 3, despite it being a really good weapon, and it has like way less bloom than the pistols had in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, and that's what makes it insane. So that is going to be my weapon tier list. Comment down below and let me know what you think. I feel like a majority of people are probably going to disagree about the DMR, because yeah, I see a lot of people overrate this weapon, or what I consider overrate this weapon. But aside from that, I think a lot of people will agree with this tier list. But let me know what you think, and also comment down below if you would like to see me make a POI tier list video for Chapter 3. And if you did enjoy the video, give it a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.